Now that we've seen what kind of instances are great for recording actions, let's go ahead and start to build our own action here from scratch inside of Photoshop. So before we do this, one thing I want you to go ahead and do is come over to the Actions panel here, and what I want you to do is load an action that's already in your Project Files folder. Should be entitled LAB Sharpen. So you come down here to the flyout menu and you'll choose Load Actions, and inside of your Chapter 3 Project Files folder, here is the labsharpen.atn file. Now, once you've selected that, go ahead and click Load. I've already loaded it into my Actions panel here, so I'll just click Cancel. And what this is going to do is just give us a reference to go by so that when we're finished with our action, we want to test it to make sure that we've done everything correctly. So this is just going to be kind of like our benchmark test for later on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start to build this LAB Sharpen action. And essentially what this is that sharpening action I was talking about earlier that I run on all of my photographs when I first bring them into Photoshop. So with this new action set that we've created here, LAB Sharpen, what we're going to do is we're going to select the new action icon, which is denoted by this little page icon down here in the Actions panel. And we're going to click that, and it's going to come up and it's going to give us the new action dialog box. So by default, it's already set to that specific action set that we have chosen there, the LAB Sharpen set. So now we get the option to name this. So I'm just going to call this LAB Sharpen 2. And also down here at the bottom, you'll notice here that we have the ability to assign a function key to this. And what this means is that we would be able to create a keyboard shortcut that corresponds to this action that we're creating here. Now, I'm not going to choose to do this for this particular action. You can do that if you want to, but I'm not going to choose to do that simply because we want to keep this as simple as possible just to record this first action here. Now, you can also go ahead and assign a color to this so that if you were working in button mode, you would automatically see this color associated with your action. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'll just select a neutral gray because that's going to go ahead and set that apart from those other colorful icons that we saw earlier in the button mode, and we'll show you exactly what this looks like in button mode in just a second. So now once we have all of those options set up like we need them to be right there, we can simply hit record, and right now Photoshop is recording this action for us. Now, as I said before, this is not a timed task, so you don't have to worry about Photoshop recording every single thing you do. Photoshop is not recording my mouse moving right here. It's not recording me talking to you. It's not recording anything except for commands that you run on this image. So a lot of people, when they first record actions, they think they have to speed up and go through all of the processes really quick because that's how long it's going to take the action to run when they go back and play it later. That's not true. Everything you do as far as processing goes is recorded in here, not the time it takes you to do so. So my suggestion is that you take your time, go slower than normal to make sure you get everything correct. That way, when you run this back on an image at a later time, everything will work perfectly. So now what we're ready to do is we're ready to start building this action using that LAB sharpening trick I was talking about earlier. So the first thing we need to do is we need to convert this image to LAB color. And we're going to do that by coming up to the image menu. We're going to choose mode, and under mode we're going to select LAB color. Now, you're not going to see any visual change on this image, and that is simply because of the fact that LAB and RGB are interchangeable color formats, meaning that you're not going to lose and or gain any color information by switching between these two modes, so you won't see any visual change at all on this image. That's why. Now, you'll also notice here inside of the Actions panel under LAB Sharpen 2 that it has already created that Convert to Mode portion of the action. So it is indeed recording, and if you also need another affirmation that this is recording, just make sure that the red record light is turned on. If you don't see anything pop up after you convert to the LAB mode, you need to make sure that that's highlighted and that you haven't accidentally clicked stop or anything like that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come over here into the Channels panel, and inside of the channels we're going to select the Lightness channel. So now as you can see over in the Actions panel there, it says select the Lightness channel, so it's really following exactly what we want it to follow here. Let me give you a little background on this action that we're building right here. The reason that I'm targeting the lightness channel here is because it's much better to sharpen only the lightness values of an image as compared to all of the values of an image, simply because when you sharpen only the lightness values, you're going to avoid color halos and JPEG artifacts and all that kind of stuff. By sharpening the luminosity values only, that eliminates those problems and also increases the amount of sharpening that you can apply to a single image. So this is just a better way to sharpen, in my opinion. So with that lightness channel selected now, what we're going to do is we're going to come up under the filter menu. We're going to choose sharpen. And in most cases, you would go ahead and choose Smart Sharpen. But since I'm not going to go through and show you how to tweak all the Smart Sharpen settings and so forth, we're going to just go ahead and choose Unsharp Mask for this, just as a global adjustment for this image. And we're going to apply a lot of sharpening here, simply because of the fact in another lesson, we are going to show you how to correct flaws in an action. And right now, we're going to over-sharpen, and we're going to consider that a flaw. So don't think that I automatically sharpen my images this much, because I really don't. When I show you how to go back in and correct the flaws of this action, I'll give you the exact values of what I use to sharpen images. But for now, we're going to set our amount to 90, our radius to 20, and our threshold to 2. And you'll notice here, if I show you before and after, let me pan over here so you can see his face. Here's before, and here's after. So we're adding in a whole lot of sharpening and really destroying this image. So we're going to go ahead now, we'll click OK. And then we're going to come back down into the channels panel, and we're going to select the LAB composite channel like so. Now it's going to show up just like that inside of the actions panel. If you've been paying attention there, you'll see there's the unsharp mask that we had there. And if you twirl open the unsharp mask, it'll show you the amount 90, 20 pixels for the radius, 2 for the threshold. So it's recording all of these steps correctly. So it's just good, especially when you're recording your first action, to go through there and make sure all of those steps are getting recorded as they're supposed to. Now I'm also going to switch back over to the layers panel here. You're not going to see any change in the actions panel because that's not an image command, so it doesn't care that I was looking at the channels or that I was looking at the layers. So it's not going to record that step. So don't get freaked out if you notice that there's no visible change to that. Now, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to convert this back to RGB. So we're going to come up here to the image menu, this time choosing mode again, and then we will switch this back to RGB. And again, you will not see a color shift here because those modes are interchangeable. And so now we've effectively done that sharpening action to this photograph, and so we're ready now to complete this process simply by coming down here and clicking stop. Now, the very last part of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back through this so that we can get back to our original image, and then we'll be ready to test. So I'm just going to close the actions panel for just a moment, and I'm going to step back through this to undo some of those changes that we just did to this image here. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this at the reverted state, and now we're ready to test our newly created action.